Okay, Madam Chair, we are now live. For anybody needing interpretation services from English to Spanish, please select the interpretation button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, then select Spanish. Committee members, in the event that we have public comment in Spanish, you will need to select the interpretation button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and select English. Thank you.
Buenas tardes a todos. Vamos a comenzar, señora Presidente. Para los que quisieran participar o escuchar en español, deben de navegar hacia la parte inferior de su pantalla de la página y seleccionar el globo donde pueden seleccionar el español. Y también les hago saber a los miembros del comité que en caso de haber comentarios en español pueden navegar al mismo globo, seleccionar en inglés para escuchar la traducción al inglés. Gracias.
Thank you all very much. Welcome to this, I think now 4th meeting of the Redistricting Committee for the City of Albuquerque. So grateful for all of the volunteer members who are here on the committee for being here with us tonight, and for all the members of the public who are here. I believe that we do have a quorum, so we can call the meeting to order. And I would like to begin by just, again, saying that New Mexico is in a state of emergency and on fire. And so we send our condolences out to all the families who are suffering tonight and hope that soon it will be well. And we hope to continue to do some good work here on behalf of the community. And I see that we have quite a few attendees here in the webinar tonight, more than we've had. We still need many more people to show up, but thank you to everyone who is here. So with that, I'll ask for, we will go on to approval of the April 6th meeting minutes. And I do want to remind the public that you can go to the website to view the minutes of each meeting, and there will also be a link to the YouTube video so that you can hear in great detail about everything that has happened in these meetings. So I hope the committee members have had an opportunity to review the minutes. And if you have had that opportunity and you're ready to vote on them, to approve them, I would accept a motion to approve the minutes of the April 6th meeting.
Madam Chair, so move.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Romero. We have a motion to approve and a second. Guess we will ask all in favor just to, I don't think we need to call the roll, but if you all in favor, just please say aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Right, so we'll approve the minutes of the April 6th meeting. And I want to go to the next communications update. We have put this on every agenda thus far, just because we want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make sure the public is aware of these meetings. And I do want to say that this morning I heard a news story. So I thank you to city staff for getting out more information about the meeting. It's only going to make things better. With that, I'll turn it over to staff Julian Moya to talk about what we're doing in terms of getting the word out.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee members, on the evening or on the afternoon, excuse me, Friday, April 22nd, our office sent out a press release with information on the committee and tonight's meeting. We'll send out another release this Friday ahead of next week's meeting as well. We did receive some coverage, as you mentioned, Madam Chair, from KOAT and an article in this morning's Albuquerque Journal. Information and links for tonight's meeting and the committee webpage were also included in this week's weekly e-news from the Office of Neighborhood Coordination. And since the last committee meeting, our office has sent out 3 MailChimp newsletters. On April 8th, we shared that the shape files had been added to the project website. On April 19th, we shared that the districtor page was live and available for people to submit maps. And on April 22nd, like I mentioned earlier, share details on tonight's meeting and reminding our audience about the Districtor page being available. We have just under 50 subscribers to the newsletter. So again, we want to ask people to sign up to receive the newsletter, and they can sign up on the project webpage, cavq.gov/202 redistricting. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Julian. Committee members, if anyone has any questions of Julian, you may ask them now. I would start by just asking if you feel like the city staff is going to want to do anything else, or you're looking for more direction from us related to what we can do related to communications.
Madam Chair, I think we got a pretty good response from doing a press release and kind of really pushing things out. But of course, we're happy to take any suggestions from the committee members or do any other sort of outreach that's recommended.
I'd like to ask the community members, and I won't put you guys all on the spot, but if anybody got any traction on using the social media kit that the staff put out for us to let people know. Does anybody have any information or feedback about using that information, or is there anything more that we need to do? If so, please so state.
Chairman Gill, I'll share quickly that just from my own efforts, there's been positive feedback. A lot of people didn't know this was happening at all. So the social media mechanism is a good channel, good route. And the YouTube link is being used, or at least the correspondence I've had is being used more than the Zoom link. So there may be more people watching than we realize, or if we're not checking the numbers on YouTube for the live broadcast, the number of attendees in Zoom may not fully represent how many people are paying attention.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Member Romero, did you have a comment?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the committee, I just wanted to also state that folks have been largely receptive. I've spoken to a couple of community groups just sort of as to the general principles and encouraging participation, but I think there's a strong sentiment that they didn't know, and they're hopeful that the process is extended. I did explain that we have two sort of discretionary as needed meetings, and again, there's a strong sentiment from the folks I spoke to that they hope we consider taking those on to give more time to folks to be involved and submit their comment and proposed maps and so on.
Thank you, Member Romero. And I believe that it will be up to the committee for us to make a decision about whether or not we believe that we need those meetings. So we can have that discussion perhaps at the end of this meeting about whether or not we think we're going to need additional meetings, or the meetings that are listed right now as needed. Any other comments? All right, hearing none, we'll go on to our next topic on the agenda, the socioeconomic data follow-up from research and polling. We had a pretty robust discussion about distributions of wealth in our last meeting, and so we wanted to just get some more information about what that looks like with the current maps. And so Brittany, we'll turn it over to you at this point.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members of the committee. As the agenda states, we do just want to do a little follow-up on this discussion about the socioeconomic vulnerability data. I'm going to share my screen here. Just as a reminder, just to sort of level set, you've seen this before. This is a map of the city of Albuquerque with the socioeconomic data superimposed on it. And what this is it's an index of sort of socioeconomic vulnerability across the city. And that index includes poverty status, unemployment, income, and educational attainment. And darker shades indicate higher levels of socioeconomic vulnerability. Lighter shades indicate lower levels of vulnerability. So, you can see here, this is the South Valley, this is Borealis. This is the international district, just to sort of orient us. The last time we were discussing this, we were sort of asked to find a way to compare how these socioeconomic sort of tracks are clustered in districts across plans. You know, do some plans have districts with higher concentrations of vulnerability than others? And so we spent some time since the last meeting sort of trying to come up with a way to be able to look at the statistics across districts and across plans in an easier way. As a reminder, comparing these data across districts and across plans isn't perfect because of the level of geography. This is at the census tract level, which doesn't match perfectly with precincts. And we use precincts to build the districts. So what we did is we went through and we assigned each tract to a district in each conceptual plan. Where a tract wasn't fully contained in a district, or where a tract was in 2 or more districts, we assigned the tract to a district if more than 50% of the people in that tract look like they're in that district. So for example, this right here is one whole census tract, but in almost all of the plans, this is split between District 5 and District 1. And even though like the bulk of the geography of this tract is in District 1, the bulk of the people who live in this district live right here. And so we assigned this tract to District 5, just as an example. So I can show you sort of the results for that. So after we assigned each tract to a district, we were then able to take the average socioeconomic score in each district based on the tracts that were assigned to that district. And so we were able to, for each plan, so you can see the plans across the top here, and then the districts down the column here. So for each district and each plan, we were able to come up with a number of sort of a score of socioeconomic vulnerability. So this is District 1 in Plan A, down to District 9 and across for all of the concepts that we've discussed so far. And additionally, I'd just like to note, because we discussed this last time, we weighted each of the census tracts based on their population. So census tracts that have a larger population are sort of worth more in this average than with lower population, to account for that sort of variability in the size of these census tracts. So just some initial observations. In all plans, District 3, which is the South Valley district, consistently has the highest socioeconomic vulnerability score, meaning it's the most socioeconomically vulnerable, followed by District 6, which is sort of the international district, and District 2, which is in most plans, the downtown district. The least sort of socioeconomically vulnerable district tends to be District 8 in all plans, except for E, where it's District 4. And then we sort of did some thinking about, you know, what's sort of a single statistic that we could compare all of the plans on. And we came up with the idea to use the range. So the range is the difference between the score in the minimum district and the score in the maximum district. So in the case of concept A, that's the difference between the score in District 8 and the score in District 3, which is 54.1. And the idea is that the smaller the range, the more effectively you distributed the socioeconomic vulnerability across tracts. So where the range is larger, you have some districts with a lot of socially vulnerable tracts and some with a lot of the lower vulnerability tracts. And where that range is smaller, we've distributed that out a little better. And so you can see here, the range for all of the plans are actually really pretty similar. Concept E has the lowest range, so sort of the most disbursement, you could say, at 53%. And I think that's interesting because concept E is the one where we tried to break up downtown into 2 different districts, if you'll recall. Yes, so I do, as I was thinking about, you know, why is the range sort of the same, you know, really similar across these plans? I think because as we've talked about before, there really is a correlation between communities of interest and socioeconomic status. And, we made a conscious effort as we were drawing all of these conceptual plans to keep, communities of interest that seem really salient together. So for example, the South Valley or the International District or downtown, right? We tried to keep those together. And in doing that, we kept sort of socially vulnerable communities together as well, which is why I think we're seeing the range be really similar across these plans. So we sort of thought, okay, what does it look like if we do try to narrow the range and distribute some of these vulnerable tracts across districts? So this is just sort of an example of what would happen if you tried to unpack some of those more vulnerable areas. So you can see what we've done here essentially is we've taken District 1 and District 3, and rather than doing sort of a horizontal stack where District 1 is sort of the west side districts and District 3 is more the South Valley, we've done more of a vertical orientation of these two districts, where District 3 comes up Unser and takes everything on the west side of Unser, including these less socially vulnerable tracts above I-40. And District 1 comes all the way down on the east side of I-40, or on the east side of Unser into the South Valley. Some other things that we did to sort of try to unpack those vulnerable areas is another sort of vertical orientation of District 6 and 7. So if you'll recall, District 6 most often sort of has this horizontal south of Lomas, south of I-40 orientation. District 7 tends to be north. And here we've taken that in a vertical direction with San Mateo and just east of San Mateo being the boundary between 6 and 7. So let me show you what that does to the social vulnerability scores. So this is the new map. We've seen all of this before. The new map is in this last column. You can see that we did get the range a little bit lower. And what's really driving that is that District 3, that South Valley district, being able to sort of unpack some of those vulnerable tracks. We were able to get that average down to 62 from 70. The other thing I want to note, and we don't see it reflected in the range because these are sort of in the middle of the range, is 6 and 7. So you can see in most all of the plans that you've seen so far, there's like a 30% difference between District 6 and District 7. So District 6 tends to be about 30 points more vulnerable on average than District 7. But doing that sort of vertical orientation. Oh, and by the way, I should mention that sort of splits the International District right in half to do that. We do get these two districts coming within 6 points of each other, which is interesting. So it's just sort of an exercise about, what is possible and how to think about, how do we distribute these vulnerabilities? How do we distribute concentrations of wealth? This is sort of what it's going to take is rethinking some of those communities. And, I think we heard when we did the redistricting at the state level, there are some arguments for having a community like the International District have, more than one representative, right? The idea that, the International District could have 2 city councilors. The sort of flip side of that is, then is the International District sort of a large enough percentage of a district to elect a candidate of their choice or to sort of be influential over those 2 city councilors. So happy to stand for questions, take feedback. Just wanted to sort of follow up on the discussions that we had last time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Brittany. I don't see any hands raised, but do we have any questions? Vice Chair Kellerman, go ahead.
Madam Chair, thank you. Brittany, I just want to say I'm impressed and grateful for the detailed work here. I mean that. What you did with averaging and some of the more advanced work to get down to a single number, I think is really helpful. We're sort of overwhelmed with all the attributes to consider, and looking at socioeconomic data, boiling it down into a single number makes it really helpful for us to act and measure what works. what's maybe making progress if we see that as something important. I was wondering on the new map in particular, and this is something the committee will follow up with, I'm sure, in discussion, but when it came to the vertical orientation, especially on the west side and in the valley, was in your opinion, did that preserve communities of the community of interest or communities of interest in that new orientation and those new lines? And then also for districts 6 and 7, did that accomplish the international district split that you just mentioned?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Member Kellerman. I mean, I would definitely defer to members of the community to talk about their own communities of interest, but in terms of sort of what we've already heard about the South Valley being a community of interest and what the boundaries of the South Valley are, sort of south of I-40 to the river, I would say that this does sort of split the South Valley as a community of interest. And also between 6 and 7, this does split. So this is where, I hope you can see my cursor, this is where the international district is from Lomas to Wyoming, and this is San Mateo, and that this would split right down the middle. This is actually Indiana or Illinois Street. I can't remember which, but it's split right down the middle there.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. I look forward to Member Quesada and Member Segura's input during the committee discussion. Thanks for answering that, Brittany. And again, thanks for the work.
Thank you, Member Baca. Joaquin, you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everyone. So just curious on that new map. It kept, I think I know the answer, but obviously the west side, it kept all those, even though they changed quite a bit, there wasn't any crossing of the river by the other districts. So with those changes, for these pockets of interest, do the population numbers balance out within this map, or is it strictly a map based on these communities of interest?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Member Baca, I'm going to pull the map back up. I heard sort of two questions. One is, are we still having to cross the river to deal with population issues? And yes, we are. So District 2 is crossing the river south of Central, and it's the same sort of configuration that you see in Concept B. Okay. And so it is taking south of Central to Coors to deal with the population. And then you can see this is the same sort of configuration that we've used in all the maps we've shown, where the district number is on the top and the population deviation is that second number. And so all of the districts are within plus or minus 5%. I will note that District 1 and District 3 are really close. They're large. They're really close to that higher end. So that's also something to think about.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Baca. Did we have any other? I think Member Stoll had a question.
Just following up on the last question, looking at this map and looking at the last options that we've had presented to us, on all of the last options, we had metrics presented to us as far as the compactness of each of these and all of those other metrics that were there, as well as we added a couple of metrics that we wanted to see, such as how many people were impacted when we made these moves on each one of these. Could we see the metrics on this particular map based on what we have applied to each of those other options, and maybe as a baseline compare this chart to, say, like option A, and what is the difference between this chart? And I would say we should do the same with the other charts that are being given to us from the constituents in the community to have some kind of metric-based discussion also. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Member Stoll. We did not produce those stats for this map. This was sort of an intellectual exercise, but we're very happy to, and I can do that, and we can produce all of the stats, all of the sort of demographic information and the compactness scores, and then the percentage of people that are moved out of their district. Happy to do that.
Thank you, Brittany. So you're saying that you could have that for us at the next meeting?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Member Pasco?
Thanks, Madam Chair. One quick question for Brittany. The term socioeconomic vulnerability is a kind of a broad one. Do you have a solid definition for what that means and how you computed it?
Sure, absolutely. I touched on it so briefly because we talked a little bit about it last time, but the CDC uses census data and compiles this vulnerability index. So what we're looking at is poverty, unemployment, income, and educational attainment. And then the actual percentages are percentage rankings nationally. So the percents themselves objectively are not that useful in this context, but they're useful comparatively across districts and plans.
Thank you, Member Quesada.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Ms. Paz. I was wondering if you could pull that map up again on our screens. It's kind of hard to tell where the boundaries lie because it's like a 30,000-foot view. I was wondering if we could zoom in closer to District 3, if that was possible.
Absolutely. I'm actually going to share the interactive version, if that's okay.
Thank you. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Let's see. Yeah, and I can turn on the streets so that they're a little easier to see. So the actual boundaries here, the eastern boundary is Unser, basically all the way down to Arnall here. And then the very end is just the end of the municipal boundaries.
Did you have a follow-up, Member Quesada? Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you for doing that. And just for clarification, the residents west of the river, south of Central, in the area you have highlighted, typically refer to ourselves as the Southwest Mesa, not typically the South Valley.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Member Segura.
I have a major objection to that map. First of all, it eliminates me from District 1 because I happen to live in that area that District 3 would take. I did talk to my other member, Dan Ergon, and Dan has the same objection. It splits the community of interest by pushing us all the way down to the South Valley. So I would have a major objection to that issue. And I'm sure that Councilor Sanchez would have the same. So I would not even try to consider that. And I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Member Segura. I just have a question about what the benefits are of looking at redistricting in this way. So what are the pros, what are the cons? We know that it may split up some communities of interest, but what would be the reason to look at mapping this way?
Madam Chair, I can take a shot at that, and then I might defer to Member Kellerman since this is sort of his brainchild. I think my understanding is that the idea is that, you know, we sort of unpack places where vulnerability is concentrated and areas of wealth where wealth is concentrated, so that representatives can sort of represent more of a cross section of the city rather than sort of more or less vulnerable areas. And Member Kellerman, I hope that I got the spirit of that.
So yeah, I think that's what I want to have a discussion about, you know, in real terms. What would it mean if we decided that we were going to start to go down this path? What would it take for us to do it, and what benefits would we get from it? Member Kellerman, if you'd like to respond to that, and then after that, Member Quesada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, thanks, Brittany. Just to follow on with that, the bigger goal here is to consider something that may not be a defined principle of redistricting, but is a key part of determining civic participation and representation across the city. So if we don't look at socioeconomics we risk having pockets of higher and lower participation and representation that is not based equally on, or as equal as we can manage in giving people of all levels of socioeconomic status a voice in local government. So I won't correlate this to any voting behavior because I know we can't consider that. But when it comes to just broadly participation and representation, socioeconomics are tightly tied, and it should be considered as a foundational element. So when we look at this and how to distribute and equally represent vulnerability across the city, it's important for who represents who and who has a voice. And those are sort of the broader arguments. It's worth considering because smaller changes won't change participation and representation in that way. It's one of the core criteria, in my opinion, and there's strong correlations with both representation and participation.
Thank you, Member Kellerman. Member Quesada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you clarify which map this one was closely to? Was it D or E? I didn't quite catch that initially.
Yes, Madam Chair, Member Quezada, just District 2, the way it crosses the river is similar to B as in boy.
And that was just for District 2, correct?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member Segura and then Member Baca.
Okay, I guess I'm going to further object to it. I mean, I understand what Member Kellerman wants. However, they're being represented now. And so I don't think we need to go into that significant of a change that will adversely affect District 1. So again, and I know Councilor Sanchez would also object to it. So I haven't spoken to him, I don't know, but I did talk to Dan Aragon and we both do not like that map at all. It affects the District too much. And I think it definitely affects District 3, the way they change it. So I guess I'm going to have to be opposed to using those metrics as part of our plan. And I'll go on record of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Quesada, I think, or Member Baca.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is curious. Obviously, you know, we've had the 5 maps that have gone out. I think this is a very important metric, especially given a lot of these areas of interest. I'm wondering, you know, as I was reading through public comment, it's map A had some positives, map E had a lot of positives. Is it possible to take these metrics and kind of and just tweak some of those maps, so to speak? And by that I mean, like, for instance, the one that cut downtown, you know, Barelas was put into District 3, which would add to that. But in this case, could you just keep that within district, make that small change into District 2 to balance that out? So that's just one example of that. And so that's what I, you know, in this, you know, to speak to Member Segura there, rather than create something all new, can we just use this metric to adjust some of the more popular maps that exist already?
Brittany, could you speak to that, or Ryan, could you speak to that? Can we add it and just do some tweaks that wouldn't be major changes?
Madam Chair, I think we could, and you know, we see that there is some variation in that sort of range statistic, and as Member Baca said, you know, concept C or concept D, where we split downtown, or has a different range than other plans. So yes, we definitely could use these data to sort of just tweak on the margins for sure. And Brian, I didn't know if you had anything else.
Madam Chair, members. So originally in the first couple of meetings, Brittany spoke about the primary principles of districting, the 5 principles that you all recall. And she spoke about the tensions that are somehow created among those principles, that if you want to keep a neighborhood intact, maybe the district will become a little bigger or maybe a little less compact, and so on, the tensions between the principles. So as a committee, one of the things you need to do is decide, you know, of those principles, which are most important to you? Well, we know you have to have equal population and not dilute minority voting strength, but ultimately, when it comes to this academic exercise that we tried, and I thought it was worthwhile doing, and it was a great idea of Member Kellerman to do. But so one of the tensions that we're essentially talking about here is, in an effort to unpack some of the more socially vulnerable areas and include some of those areas in a more higher socioeconomic status, higher income area, you run the tension of reducing the communities of interest within the district. So if part of the Westgate or Southwest Mesa, crosses over Central, crosses over I-40, goes up further down the line, or if part of District 1 does the same, goes down, yeah, you have just unpacked a socially vulnerable area and included some of it in a different district. But the question you need to ask yourself is it worth it to do that given the tension created by the communities of interest issue? And one of the things Brittany brought up was, okay, you can make an argument splitting the international district by essentially unpacking a socially vulnerable area and including it in a more affluent area might give might have people really be challenged when it comes to voter participation levels and encourage people to vote more so they can elect a candidate of their choice. The international district could end up with 2 members, could end up with 1 member on the council, or could end up with 0 members of the council. And that's a risk that one takes in politics. So you need to be saying to yourself as a committee, what's most important? Is it to preserve those communities of interest, or is it to unpack a socially vulnerable area and include it with a more higher socioeconomic area in order to unpack it and then risk preserving the communities of interest that may have more in common? It's more of a principled debate among you.
Thank you. And I guess I'd ask one more question. Is it an either or? Can it be a both and?
Well, if you do, Madam Chair, members, start tweaking the plans on the edges, you might take a Westgate precinct and put it with a Ladera precinct, okay? And so you've accomplished unpacking 1 or 2 precincts. And the answer is yes, you can do that. The question is that what you want to do? Is that consistent with the principles of preserving communities of interest or not? And so that would be a choice of yours. Do you take 1 or 2 international district precincts rather than splitting it in half? Yeah, that would unpack the international district a little, but is that what are you going to hear from members of the community when that's done? And that's something that you can ask us to do.
Thank you, Member Kellerman, and then Member Romero.
Madam Chair, thank you. And Brian, I appreciate that frame. To follow up, Madam Chair, on your last comment, can we have it both? I think this is a tool, and now we have a metric to use in, again, assessing our concept maps and looking at new concept maps. The work that's been done, I don't believe we need to look at it as the final iteration here. Let's use this number, especially the SVI range, to reassess the impact of these concept maps on working people across the city. If we preserve communities of interest, can we also improve the distribution of vulnerability? I think that's a question that we can dialogue, and we can arrive at a number, a low enough number. On that, I have, so to finish that thought, arrive at a low enough number while honoring and deferring to the communities of interest, the district representatives who can speak to those, and public comment from people of those communities. So I think we can honor both of those, both this new tool and preserving these communities by listening to the people from them. I would also add that one thing I haven't looked into myself, and I'm just interested with all the experience in research and polling, if there's any reference for other cities, what have they achieved in terms of getting to a range, a low number on that range? Is there a number we might want to target, or is there something that they, if they aspire to get a lower range, what have other cities accomplished? And then was there any impact on communities of interest in those cities? So Albuquerque is its own city. We're a unique community, but are there reference points for what's possible and how this might have played out? And we don't need a huge presentation necessarily. I'm just wondering if off the top of your heads, and also if there's a few things we can look into for the next meeting to consider where else this has happened and what was accomplished.
I think a lot of cities, Madam Chair, members are going through that process right now. And frankly, every city comes up with their own approach. And unlike you, many of them are still have inserted politics and elections and things of the like. But you know, every city is different, and many cities are also developing concepts where they're looking at the gamut of these things. So I'm not sure. I personally think, you know, you should do what you think is best, and I'm not sure how much guidance we can get from others. I mean, we could take a look at comparable cities, but Santa Fe, within their ordinance, they define communities of interest and speak to that the districts shall preserve economic and racial interests in the same district. So Santa Fe in their ordinance did not go in the direction of dispersing or unpacking socially vulnerable areas. By ordinance, they want to keep those areas together. And so we're doing Santa Fe and we're honoring that ordinance and that approach. But sort of the approach we took here, frankly, in that we're trying to put communities of interest together. It's just that different concepts take a different view of what those communities of interest are. In one plan, there's a foothills district. Well, that's a different take on the Heights. But in all of our plans, we try to at least consider different approaches to communities of interest.
Thank you so much. We had a hand up from Member Romero.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I just want to say I respect Member Segura's sentiment and protective nature of his district. I think we all carry that a little bit with us, or else we probably wouldn't be in this Zoom room talking about all this. But I just want to caution all of us, myself included, about just being instinctively or categorically opposed to some map or something. I think this SVI figure is relevant as Mr. Kellerman explains it. It bears on overperformance, underperformance. I don't think any map is final at this point. I think it should be considered in our work though. And again, I have same sort of feelings about some of the concept maps. I'm from the downtown, and when I see things affecting downtown, but I'm going to reserve that instinct at this point. And I think that the SVI is relevant in this point. That's all.
Thank you, Member Romero. Member Quesada, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In Member Segura's defense, he's feeling the same emotions I did with our first initial meeting. I was up to DEFCON 3, and because of our last meeting, we took a poll and primarily voted for concept A, and that kind of took the DEFCON level back down. So I totally understand how he feels. I'm kind of feeling the same sentiment, and just wanting to know if it is possible to revisit concept A.
Thank you, Member Quesada, and to all the members, I just want to say that we're speaking conceptually right now among the members, and I wanted to say that we all, I hope, will keep an open mind, and we want to hear from the public. And so what I'd like to do is say that we'll revisit this conversation at the end of our discussion, and we want to go into public comments. We can be informed by what members of the public have to say about the process. And we would ask members of the public to raise your hand if you are interested in providing some public comment. I have asked Vice Chair Kellerman to handle public comment today because I do have someone from my office who's going to be testifying, and you know, just like all of us here, you know, I'm a long-term member of the Albuquerque community. I care a great deal about how things happen in this community, and I want to make sure that I keep an open mind. And so with that, I wanted to have Member Kellerman run the public comment for us. I see that Petra has her hand up. We are going to ask, if you are making a public comment, that you would both raise your hand and that you would also be willing to give us your full name and be on camera. Petra?
Hi, yes, Madam Chair. I just wanted to draw your attention to agenda item D, where public comment is agenda item E.
Oh, yes.
And I wanted to, there was a map, I think just the one map that was submitted during public comment, that was written public comment. I don't know if they're here to also present their map verbally, but I did want to make sure they had a chance, that you guys had a chance to discuss the map that was submitted in written comments.
Oh, thank you. And we do need to do that. We do need to do that first. And you guys can charge this to my aging allergy brain right now. So I will get back to item D. But I think we do need to have a conversation about what maps will be presented. We did talk in the last meeting about how we're going to make sure that the maps met the minimum criteria. Julian, if you wouldn't mind putting up the minimum criteria for the maps, and we want to figure out as a committee what we will allow to be presented and how we vet. I think our suggestion was that it needed to meet the minimum criteria, and if it did not, then we need to come up with some solutions for how we might allow members of the public to correct those things. We need to tell them why it didn't meet the criteria and what they need to do, and give them an opportunity to present again in our next meeting. So I guess I would ask staff and research and polling if we had any maps that did meet the criteria, how many were presented, and then we'll talk to the committee about what we want to hear and how long we'll give people to present.
Madam Chair, thank you. So we had 2 maps submitted, one on the district portal and one through written public comment. The one that was submitted through written public comment by Scotty Romberg, who I see is on the call, did meet all of the minimum criteria. The other map that was submitted through the district portal was missing some precincts and also didn't meet the population requirements. And if the committee sees fit, I'm happy to talk about, you know, what it would take to fix that. But that's where we are, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And is that person who submitted the map in the webinar today, the one that did not meet criteria?
Madam Chair, I'm not sure. The only, so because it wasn't accompanied by a written comment, the only sort of identifying information we have is the title, which is Team Pokemon. So I'm not sure how to interpret that.
Okay, so we would need Team Pokemon to come forward with a name and let us know, but that map doesn't meet criteria. And if we don't have a way to reach the person, so I think it doesn't meet our minimum criteria that we need a name associated for them to speak. But now I'll open it up to the committee to make a decision about how long we will give if we want to allow the member of the public to be promoted to panelists so that they can present the map to us, or how we want to handle that. Open for comments about how we'd like to handle it as a committee.
Madam Chair, I'd like to propose a 5-minute time limit, and we can go from there if needed, if there are questions from the committee.
Any other questions or any other comments about that? Do we agree 5 minutes to present? I think we can do it just with a yes. All in favor?
Yes.
Great. So,
Yes.
Julian, if we could promote Mr. Romberg to panelist to allow the community member to present a map, we'll start the time as soon as we get that community member into the room.
Thank you, Madam Chair. He's coming. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's a she.
Yes.
Oh,
Ms. Romberg.
hi, Scotty. Thank you, Ms. Romberg. Thanks for being here. We appreciate you so much.
Well, you're welcome. Hi.
All right. So we'll start the time now if you want to present. I think we need to share screen. So are we able to share the map?
Sure. Thank you.
Madam Chair, yes, I'll pull up the map, and Scotty, just give me kind of any sort of verbal directions on if you want to zoom in or anything like that to mark the map. I'll pull it up right now.
Oh, by the way, Madam Chair, I live in District 4.
Great.
Okay.
All right. You're on. 5 minutes starts now.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the board. I decided that I wanted to modify map A to try to get the number of residents within each district closer to parity. And so therefore, I tweaked the map with the help of Maureen Scourin, because I'm not as computer literate. I mean, and so it seems, you know, keeping in mind contingencies of districts, compactness of districts, and geographic areas, I just made modifications. But if you will look on, I'm going to move my picture here so I can show you. If you look at the population balance, you'll notice that it's a little bit more balanced population wise. I don't know if that's your sole criteria, but I just thought we have the, I also checked at the District 1, District 2, and District 3 are majority Hispanic. So we had 3 strong communities, minority communities. So I just felt like I just tweaked it. It wasn't anything major. Any questions, Madam Chair?
I don't have any questions at this moment. Do any members have questions? I think Member Buckholz, you had your hand raised.
Yes, and Ms. Bromberg, thank you for your work on here. Just a couple of technical items. Is it correct that I heard you say that you started with Model A and then did some tweaking off of that model?
Yes, Madam Chair, and Member Buckholz, I did correct.
Okay, so just for my edification, I am looking at your map. Can you give me a couple of bullet point summaries as to where the changes were made from the Model A?
From my recollection, I moved some districts that in District 9 to the west. I moved some precincts from District 8 to the west into District 7. And I know you're in District 8, and I'm in District 4. We're, you know, we're less than a mile apart, but right. I think I cleaned up District 3. I moved that top north border up a little bit, and I moved part of 2 into District 1 a little bit.
Okay. So minor changes across mostly the eastern part of the city. And then
I'm sorry, Member Buckholz. I started from the west trying to get the population closer to balance, and then I worked my worked myself from the outside in.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate your answers, and I appreciate the hard work that you put into this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Quesada?
Madam Chair, Mrs. Romberg, I want to thank you for participating. Public participation is very important to me. I've been attending meetings, neighborhood association meetings in my district, and really trying to shake the bushes and get people to submit their maps and to participate. So thank you for that. With that, Julian, would you mind zooming into District 3? So it's really hard to see from this. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Member Quezada, I'm happy to talk a little bit about the specific changes in this map, if that's helpful.
That would be helpful. I was gonna ask you to do that. So
Yeah. Julian, would you mind if I shared my screen instead? So I can zoom in and out?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Thank you. Oh, it says that we've disabled screen sharing.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I turned it off for public comments, but
Oh, okay.
it should be good to go now.
Thank you. Let's see. I've got it up. Here we go. Okay, so in District 3, the big difference is that this piece sort of along the Bosque used to be in District 3. Under this plan, it stops here at Sunset. So this is where the Monte Carlo Steakhouse is. So all of this goes into District 2 from District 3. And that's the only change to District 3. There's a small change between District 5 and District 1, which is this area going into District 5 from District 1. District 1 is also losing these 2 precincts to District 2 under this plan. So this right here is Sequoia and this is Coors. And so it's these 2 precincts moving from District 1 to District 2. The other thing that Ms. Romberg did here is this is District 9, took 1 precinct south of Eubank between this is Constitution and the freeway. This is where Los Altos Park is. So it sort of comes along through this neighborhood. And then the other change is under Concept A, we had pulled in this little piece. I'm going to turn on the current districts. We had pulled in this little piece here. She also pulls in these 2 precincts between Comanche and Candelaria and Moon and Eubank. So those are the changes. And as she said, you know, these are such minor changes that the demographic data don't change very much.
thank you. So it's more closely associated to Concept Map A.
That's correct. Yeah, and the population deviation is a little bit smaller than we see under Concept A. So that was the goal, and she did it. Good job.
Member Stoll.
Yes, once again, I think this is some really good work from the community to make these tweaks like this. But once again, I would reserve judgment on this until our next meeting, if we could get all of the metrics against this map also. And if we could use the original Concept A and then look at the metrics against this and see what the difference is. And I would be very interested in seeing just what the difference between the two is. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Stoll. Member Segura.
Madam Chairman, Ms. Post, can you give the boundary for the northern end of District 1?
Absolutely. So this is the current boundary for Concept A, which is that escarpment that we talked about, you know, where there's sort of that bluff. That's where we're holding the boundary between District 5 and District 1. So that stays the same. The big difference is here. It sort of pulls in this precinct that's mostly sort of in the petroglyph area, but has some implications for Volcano Vista High School and that area here. coming into District
I just
5.
wanted to know the boundary and make sure that our councilman wasn't redistricted.
Yes, yeah, and I can turn that on. This doesn't impact any sitting councilors.
No, it looks good. Thank you. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Member
Thank
Stoll,
you.
did you get your question answered, or did you have your hand raised again? Okay. I think what we need to figure out at this point is, do we accept this map as a new concept map that we want to put through the same metrics that we put the other concept maps through, understanding that this is a community map that does meet the criteria. Community member Romberg, we thank you for your hard work. I guess I would ask one question before we move on to public comment. What did you hope to gain by doing this map?
Chair McGill, I was just trying to even out the population because I remember, I think it was I don't know if it was Member Segura or it was, I can't remember who said it. They felt like there was too much population on the west side, and I was trying to even out the population because chances are the population is going to continue on the west side. I mean, I know for my living in District 4, there's some movement, there's some growth on the northern part of the district. So I know that's going to grow a little bit. But I was just trying to make it more even for right now because in 10 years, it's going to be different. So that was it.
We so appreciate you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Member Buckles, did you have a question for the community member, or did you have a closing comment? You're on mute.
How's that?
That's better.
Yes. A question for our experts, if Madam Chair, you don't mind and they don't mind. And without putting you guys on the spot, because obviously it's the decision-making of the members of the committee, are you able to comment on sort of the technical value of the work that Ms. Bromberg did as compared to your proposition A? In other words, is your feeling that it accomplishes more or less the same things? It creates other imbalances that we're not considering. And again, if the question is begging for some decision-making on the merits, I don't want to put you on that spot, but I was wondering whether you could make technical comments about the nature of the work that was done.
Sure, absolutely, Chair and Member Buckholz. So I would say, in terms of the stated goal of, making the population more equal, it absolutely does that. I do think that there are some places, especially here, between Coors and the river and Sequoia, and then here, sort of north of the freeway, south of Constitution, where we're not sort of sticking to major thoroughfares, which is a goal that we at Research and Polling often have because that reduces voter confusion. It also keeps neighborhoods together. You can see that this sort of splits a neighborhood here between District 7 and District 9. So, it's really sort of about what the committee sees as the most important goals, if it's equalizing the population as close as possible or sort of sticking to major thoroughfares and keeping neighborhoods together. But that's sort of what I see as the trade-off of this map.
I appreciate that answer. Thanks much.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank again, community member Romberg for being with us today. I'm going to now go to public comment. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Kellerman to run that.
Madam Chair, thank you. I want to start first with the public comments that were submitted in written form through the website, make some reference to those comments, and then open it up to anyone who's raised their hand Just quickly from Timothy Carlton McQueen. The comment is, I worry concept maps D and E would be radical shifts for District 7. I want to just go through these quickly. Something the last member of the public just referenced from Maureen Scourin. I appreciate the redistricting committee and the city staff for making good effort at outreach. I realize this includes Spanish interpretation for meetings. I would like to ask also that the main webpage be translated into Spanish and a link posted from the main page to the Spanish page. Diane Owens notes, and I don't think this is necessarily related to us. Yesterday I was during a hearing regarding variance requests. She notes 2 requests. I testified I was okay with the lot divisions under the false belief that it was useless to oppose these requests. During the hearing and after my testimony, I became aware that the ordinances had changed and it was possible that city councilors would uphold the current ordinances put in place in my neighborhood. I do oppose the variance requests in these 2 ordinances. I think that's related to another piece of legislation and not the business of this committee. From Maureen Scourin. Hello, Ms. Morris. I see that Albuquerque has been added to District R. Do you expect that a link will soon be ready for people to submit maps via the city webpage? I saw that link was available on the page, so I wanted to note that. And finally, Scotty, who we just heard from, I've modified concept A. I thought it was the closest to being the better of the 5, it still needs tweaking. And Justin Ray Allen. Hello, committee members. Thank you for your time and attention in redistricting Albuquerque. My name is Justin Allen. I'm a District 3 voter in Albuquerque. In listening to this committee and testimony, I've heard support for the West Side districts contained in map concept A and map concept D. I would like to voice support for this committee to include that West Side district layout of districts 1, 3, and 5 in every concept. If we have settled on that and on 3 majority Hispanic voting age population districts, we can guarantee that this will be the West Side as this process advances. If any committee member objects to the West Side 3 districts contained in concept A and D, they should give voice to that now. As a member of the committee, I'm under the impression that this committee agrees with the lines of those 3 districts, and we should move forward with that understanding, if that is correct. Thank you again for your time and effort on redistricting. So with that, I'd like to open up to members of the public, if they can raise their hands, and Julian, if you can help me with anyone who's on board.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Vice Chair. I have let everyone that have their hands raised in, and so you can put your hands down, and I'll just call by the original order that the hands went up. So our first speaker will be Twyla McComb.
Madam Chair and committee, I just have a few questions about some things that I've heard this evening. I currently reside in District 3 and would like to stay that way. I live at Crestview Bluff, which is on the south side of Central. I'm just going to say right across from Golden Pride on Central at Old Coors. All of you guys probably know that place. Most people in Albuquerque do. The questions I have tonight, I'm not a statistician, and I don't know how to combine data together, but is there a way to put your socioeconomic data together with population and come up with a variance that shows what this community would look like if we had both of those metrics in one place? The second thing that I would like to say is that I don't feel that it makes a whole lot of sense to break up the West Central corridor at all. There's been a lot of work over the years to bring this group of people together in merchants associations, neighborhood associations, and to give us a voice to speak. I do feel that in many of the maps, especially in my neighborhood, we seem to be one that is closest to the river, although still a ways away, but one of the ones that are being flipped back and forth. And I am concerned that the population in this neighborhood would not give my neighborhood a voice in the future in voting if I were to be combined in the neighborhood across from the river. We have worked together as a team here, and I understand the communities of interest piece, but we've accomplished a lot of things on this in this particular area of District 3 because we are able to come together and have a voice in the city. And without that, we have seen District 3 being pushed aside many, many, many times by other districts. So as a member of the public, I would wish that we could stay together as much as we can. And then my third comment is really about why all of the little tiny precincts picked out of the middle of other large districts and put in with other ones. I noticed that District 3 has a ton of little tiny pieces toward much further south than where I live, in the midst of the rest of district, I don't know, the district that encompasses Old Town. So those are my comments and my questions and things that I would like to see if you guys could do. I would love to see some numbers really with the socioeconomic and population and what that does. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, all three of them. I'd like to remind everyone from the public too, we're limiting this to 2 minutes. And with that, could we move to the next person submitting public comment?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Our next speaker will be, I believe it's kind of Westsider, WSER. If you don't mind just identifying yourself before your comments. Thank you.
Hello, it is Westsider indeed. So I just have a question, or perhaps it's two questions. Is there a minimum number of maps required by ordinance for this committee to submit to council for consideration? And is there a maximum number of maps set by ordinance that this committee may send to council for consideration? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to defer quickly to Deputy Director Morris. Do you have any information on that? I don't believe there is a minimum or maximum.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair. There is no minimum or maximum, no. If someone has the time to submit us 100 maps, then that is what we'll have the committee look at. And if folks want to submit 1 or 2, then that also is just as lovely.
Okay.
Madam Chair, as it relates to...
My question wasn't answered. My question wasn't answered. That wasn't the question I asked.
Let me take that, Madam Chair and members. Similar to what Ms. Morris said, when it comes to this committee's submission of plans to the council, there's no minimum or maximum. So this committee could consider as many plans as they so choose, and this committee could submit to the council more than one plan, or as many as they'd like.
Thank you, Brian. Westsider, does that answer your question? Did you have any other public comment to submit?
No, Mr. Sanderhoff answered the question I asked. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I noticed Member Buchholz said you had your hand up. Did you have?
I did, but my friend Mr. Sanderhoff answered the question correctly, so I wasn't going to comment on it.
Got it. Thank you. Julian, could we move on to the next person submitting comment?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair. Our next speaker will be Mason Graham.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Mason Graham. I'm with the New Mexico Black Voters Collaborative. When we participated in redistricting at the state level, we were often asked the question, where are the Black and African Americans here in New Mexico? The answer to that question is right here in the city of Albuquerque. Over 20% of the African American population resides in Albuquerque. That largest percentage of that being in District 6, the International District. District 6 and the International District is considered to be one of the most culturally diverse areas in the city. But as you heard earlier, also one of the most vulnerable according to the Social Vulnerability Index. When creating your recommendations, it's important for you as a committee to understand that the folks in these communities are bound together by more than just race and geography. And it sounds like a lot of you all do have a deep understanding of that. The data used to identify these populations does come from the 2020 census, however, which does not include the undercount of Black and African Americans that live in our city and unfortunately may not reflect accurately the population of our Black residents growing and living in these areas. Often, Black and African Americans feel excluded from these types of processes like redistricting because our numbers are considered to be insignificant. And as a committee, I ask that you all carefully consider our Black residents and communities, our communities of interest, as important factors to redrawing lines, especially those that intersect with District 6 in the International District. And I do want to echo what Brian Sandoval said earlier, is that when you are considering the social vulnerability index in the drawing of these maps, you do run the risk of unpacking these communities of interest that have been tied together due to economic constraint. So overall, we do ask that the recommendations that you submit are reflective of our demographics, the city's demographics as a whole, and over 50% of that identify as Hispanic or a person of color. So our organization is in strong support of MAP Concepts A, MAP Concept D, or really any MAP concept like presented earlier that maintains 3 majority Hispanic voting age population districts. When we say majority, we mean over 51%. So thank you for hearing my comment today, and we look forward to seeing the results of this process.
Mason, thank you for the comment and that framing, especially around communities of interest. I'll reserve comments for the committee discussion after this. Do any members of the committee have anything to add? Julian, could you move on to the next person?
Our next,
yes, sorry, Member Pasco.
Yes, is it appropriate to add the one map that was presented by a member of the public to all the concept maps, put it on the website for everyone to see? It seems like that would be a good idea.
I think we're going to discuss that when we get back to our committee discussion.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Julian, could you?
Yes.
Go ahead. Thank you.
No problem. Our next speaker is Althea May Atherton.
Yes, my name is Althea May Atherton. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a proud board member of the Victory Hills Neighborhood Association in District 6. I wanted to start out first by thanking Chairwoman McGill. I'm used to hearing your singing voice, and so I'm really grateful to hear that you're one of the people who's protecting my democratic voice and being a steward of this really important democratic process. So I just want to thank you all and all the members of the committee for doing this sacred work. I really appreciate the data-driven approach that I've been hearing so far in this meeting. I'm particularly hoping that we, as my neighbor Mason of District 6 just said, are protecting marginalized voices in our data. And so far, I'm really liking the looks of Map D, but I think it's still very early in the process. I'm looking forward to playing with the data myself and maybe coming up with some maps myself. And I just really hope to hear in this discussion today more talk about the racial data, in particular by protecting marginalized voices, as we are both required to do in the Voting Rights Act, and also because it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Althea, thank you for that input and that comment. And thanks for respecting and appreciating our work. Julian, is there anyone else who's in line for submitting comments?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair. Our next speaker will be Felipe Rodriguez.
Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Felipe Rodriguez. I live in District 2, downtown Albuquerque, and I have some family also living in the International District, District 6. I have lived in Albuquerque more than 10 years, and I love it. I consider it my home, but as a Mexican immigrant, I have felt at times the experience of being invisible to our government. And that is the same experience that many communities of color are experiencing right now throughout the city, specifically in some of the neighborhoods that other folks have talked about. And so I just want to ask that throughout this process, you consider race and other socioeconomic factors of some of our communities here in Albuquerque, and in that way uplift the voting power of people of color in our city. Thank you very much, and thank you for your work.
Thank you very much, Felipe. And I wanted to see if there's any, or actually, Julian, could you note how many more people are in line or potentially in line for public comment?
Sure, Mr. Vice Chair, we have 2 more speakers that are in as panelists. Unless there's any other folks that are attendees that would want to speak, just please use your raise a hand function. And with that, we'll go to our next speaker is Melissa Sanchez.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I am a West Side resident. I currently live in District 1, and I want to speak in support of MAP Concept A. Also, thank you to the community member who submitted their map, because that is pretty close to Concept A, and I do appreciate the work that was put into that and the adjustments made, particularly north and south of I-40. I believe that is a community of interest, which those areas actually share, some commonalities. And so I'm not opposed to that map either, but as it currently stands, I would go with Concept Map A. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. And I know we have one more public comment.
Yes, Alan Schwartz.
Alan, I believe you're on mute.
Now?
Can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Alan Schwartz. I live on the west side in District 5. When we moved here 25 plus years ago, it was District 1, as was the entire west side. And in that period of time, now we have 3 districts, and in each instance, a district was extracted from the east side to balance everything out, and it was installed on the west side. And looking forward, I can't say at what rate where city's going to expand, but it's a pretty good bet it's going to expand on the west side, because that's where the vacant land is. That's pretty much the only place to build houses. So my comment was, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to push the populations of District 3 and 5 at the upper limit, because it only gets diluted as the west side grows. So, the one person, one vote thing exists at a point in time, and then as the population shifts, it changes. So I would say that the Districts 5 and 1 should be on the underpopulated to the ideal number to accommodate the future growth.
Alan, thank you. We appreciate that framing as well. I open it up to any remaining public comments. Julian, if there's anyone else who has raised their hand since we last gave that count.
Mr. Vice Chair, no one has raised their hand, so I think that'll conclude public comments.
Thank you, Julian, and thanks for the work there. I now turn it back over to the Madam Chair to commence our committee discussion.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair Kellerman. And thank you to all members of the public. I want to say that we are going in the right direction. We have more people from the public who are participating, and we really do want more individuals. So I want to open this up for public comment, but I'd like to synthesize what I think we want to talk about. So we want to talk about how we allow appropriately vetted concept maps. And I think we're still we need to always continue to say that we're talking about concepts and not fait accompli. This is nothing is set in stone. So we want to figure out how we're going to allow those appropriately vetted concept maps to be listed on our website, if that's something that we want to do. We also need to talk as a committee about if we're going to use the SVI, the Social Vulnerability Index, as an overlay for how we discuss all of the maps in the future. I think Member Stoll also asked that we look at making sure that every concept map is being evaluated based on the same metrics. And so we want to talk about that. And then finally, I think in this next 30 minutes, we want to make a decision about whether or not we're going to keep all of the meetings. We have, I think, 2 meetings listed as optional. Do we want to keep all those meetings on our calendar in order to continue to allow for more and more public comment? So that's what I think we need to discuss. If there's anything else that I missed, we would give you an opportunity to speak on those issues. And I think we'll just go district by district and get comment on the 4 things that I mentioned, and please add anything that I may have missed. So we'll start with Petra calling the roll, starting with District 1.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So District 1, we have Representative Segura and Representative Dan Aragon.
I just have a minute. Now I've taken the emotion out of it, but my idea is that I would be opposed to anything that would do adverse impact to a district. So I'm happy with the status quo, and so is Mr. Aragon and of course Councilor Sanchez. I am a realist and understand we do have to make changes, but again, we have to keep with the continuity of the district. We don't want to do anything that's going to adversely affect it, and that's what I would be opposed to. If it's something that is close to what we've got now, I think we could support it. And concept A is one of those that is very close to what we would support. On that, I'll end my discussion.
Petra, if you want to just keep calling.
Sure. Council District 2, committee members Romero and Baca.
Sure, I'll go first, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Morris, and members of the committee. At this point, would advocate for erring on the side of inclusion. I would like to ask, and if we need to move and have it voted on, that Ms. Romberg's map be included. I would also ask if the concept maps can be drawn such that they include the SVI component. The other thing is that I think I would advocate for utilizing the additional time based on what sentiment has been expressed to me at the public speaking engagements that I've entertained. I will note that 10 years ago, that committee, and we don't need to track them for this simple reason, but they did utilize those 2 additional meetings, as I recall, and looking at the chair's letter. And I think that given the increasing interest on behalf of the public as this progresses with each passing meeting, I think that we're going to need to do that, just to allocate the proper effort and work to consider everyone's input. Insofar as the issue of the west side, I don't know that can be overcome, that they need to shed numbers. I do want to be thoughtful about communities of interest, but the city has changed, and I suspect it's probably going to change even more so in another 10 years. So I think we need to factor that into our considerations. I don't have anything else. I don't know if my alternate compatriot there from District 2 has any comment. Thank you all, committee and Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee. I just would like to second a lot of Mr. Romero's sentiments, really including SVI into some of the existing conceptual maps, that sort of tweaking, so to speak, similar to the public map that was just introduced, which I also think should be included. I would say, just in the interest of time and how much work all of this is, I've heard a lot of support for map A, map D, and map E, and maybe we could limit to that. Although if it's not too difficult, all the maps would be great to have some sort of tweaking based on the SVI. And then finally, same thing, the west side has seen some pretty tremendous growth. It will continue to see some growth. It's not what it was 10 years ago. It won't be the same 10 years from now. Maintaining a status quo is likely not a good idea at all. We've discussed this, the need to cross the river, the need to make some changes. I think, we want to protect our counselors' homes. No question there. I think that's pretty universal about everyone, or maybe specific, maintaining that their homes stay within their districts. But beyond that, I think there should be some changes, and we need to be open to those changes in the district boundaries as we move forward on this. So thank you.
Council District 3, committee members Quesada and Hernandez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Petra, I echo the sentiments made by Member Segura. I'm also in favor of concept A. I would also be open to include the Romberg map as well. As far as committee meetings, the more the merrier. I love public comment. Public feedback is important, and I think that should help guide our work. And I'd like to hear what my alternate Hernandez has to say, what his thoughts are. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members, partner Quesada. I think that there's a lot to consider. Yes, the West Side needs to shed some numbers, but when we look at constituents, Twyla McComb brought up some very valid points in terms of the communities of interest and some of the work that has been done specific to the West Central Corridor. And I only talk about that because that is what my current work is. In looking at that, what we're looking at is pulling apart that community of interest and the work that has been going on in that particular area for well over 30 years, right? And so, those are the things that we've got to consider. And I'm all for the SBI, but that seems, like it might take more of a, north to south alignment and kind of restructuring that, to be inclusive and to have a good mix. And I'm not sure if that's kind of what you were after, Member Kellerman, is to look at that type of an alignment. But I mean, the north side is different from the south side. It just is. And so I think that, all these concepts, that everybody's discussing, I come from the place or the mindset of common sense, right? And we look at, the 23.2% growth on one side of the river versus 23.2% decline on the other side. And what that tells me is that maybe we ought to consider, the future growth and how we can keep these communities of interest together and maybe potentially look at another district on the west side in planning for that future growth. And so, as it stands, I'm in favor of concept A. I know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and I think that there's a lot of work, that still needs to happen. And we still need to engage the community probably just a little bit better. Member Romero, I hear the same sentiments in community meetings that nobody knew that this was happening, and now that we're making them aware, they want more time to participate. So I'm all for the extra meetings, even if we need to add to that. But I'll leave it at that. It's my long-winded version of we still have a lot of work to do. Thank you.
Council District 4, committee member Reynolds and Latham.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I will say that I'd like to also in favor of putting the Ronberg map onto our review maps. I am in favor of map A still, concept map A. And it's really good to see the public comments and
the addition of the SVI definitely puts a different approach on this. I think it's has to still be vetted further to understand it and how the implications could be pro or con to help us make those decisions. But it's really good to see more of the community involvement. So I think the social media has helped quite a bit. So thank you. And I want to defer over to my partner, Rebecca.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, members of the committee. Thank you for understanding my late participation. I'm in Philadelphia on business, learning about creating more equitable experiences for youth in New Mexico. But this is such an important process that I scrapped everything in Philly to come and be a part of at least the tail end. So I apologize if anything that I say is not sensitive to what occurred in the first part of this meeting. I do distinctly remember the last time we met that in the 2 votes that we took, there was a large majority who favored one particular concept. I thought it was D. It may have been A because I hear a lot of talk about concept A, but I believe 60% in the first vote and then 65% in the second vote favored this same concept. It was very similar to what is currently in existence. I believe, again, hopping on late, just looking at Ms. Stromberg's map, also that it looked very favorable. And I'm grateful for the constituency that takes the time to put in additional concepts. I am, again, like all of you, in favor of having as many meetings needed. Chairperson McGill, I did speak with Gene Grant about getting the word out through NMPBS and New Mexico in Focus about the process. He wants to speak with you and do some more promotion of the redistricting committee and getting the public involved. So thank you to everyone who has diligently worked to make sure that the public is involved in this process and that it feels really authentic for everyone.
Council District 6, committee member, Council District 5, committee member Aragon.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Thank you, Madam Chair. I shared the same sentiments of Member Quesada and Segura as it relates to map A, but I think we should continue to remind ourselves that these are just concepts and these are working documents until we've considered all factors. I do think it's important for us to have as many meetings as possible. I do think that it encourages the public to participate. So I would join the other members who are suggesting that we have the additional meetings because I do think they'll be helpful. Just like to suggest further that utilizing the SBI would be a consideration, but it is not a legal necessity as defined by the Supreme Court decisions that guide us in this redistricting process. Concept that might be considered, but it would not and should not, and frankly, based on the legal precedent that we're guided by, is not a legal necessity. Would be interesting, however, to see how that works. So I'm all in favor of looking at that information as well as we proceed. Thank you, Madam Chair, members.
Council District 6, committee member, Chair McGill. Yes, Chair McGill.
I'll defer. I'm not sure if my counterpart is here today, but I'll make my comments at the end.
Okay, it doesn't look like Mr. Nahada is here. So Council District 7, committee member, Vice Chair Kelman and committee member Bergmans.
Thank you. And my alternate, Ms. Bergman, she's traveling, so I'll be speaking for District 7 alone tonight. But I wanted to just emphasize, I share the sentiments and I really respect the comments from, well, really all the members, but especially Member Segura, Romero, Baca, Quesada, and Hernandez, thinking about preserving communities of interest and balancing that with what we've seen changes how we may want to look at drawing these lines and how we frankly will see the concept maps when we apply that layer and that number. So the SVI range, I believe, is a very important element. I appreciate all the work behind this and I appreciate the committee being open to considering that. as was just noted by Member Aragon, this is not a legal necessity, and I respect that. But seeing how it affects and shapes how we draw these lines is quite important. And I do believe there's a way to have that tool included, especially just to give us another reference and another tool to make this determination, to give working people representation and have that inclusion and consider what it might look like to preserve communities of interest and to have a better range or a lower range number. I think that's possible, and it will take some iterations. So that may not change drastically if we consider what's possible, how far or how low we could get that range potentially, if that's one of our goals. There may be ways, and one of the things I wanted to bring up as I've been listening to both public comments and the committee discussion so far, how can we clearly define the boundaries, if that's possible, of our major communities of interest? And based on that, I know there will be gaps between what those boundaries represent and what the district boundaries currently are. Concept A represents the smallest amount of change. So what does it look like to have communities of interest defined and then to consider iterations on concept A or other concept maps that preserve those communities, but considering those new boundaries within those new districts? So here are the boundaries of the communities of interest. How can we shift precincts based on that and maybe add population up to the population variance limit that we have? So with that, I just wanted to add a few questions. What parts of District 1, 2, 3, and 6 are not within a community of interest? Something for us to consider. What new areas can be added with a lower SVI up to our population deviation limits? And for District 8, I'm interested in input on what would it look like to shift precincts to add SVI and then disperse the white majority within that district to neighboring districts. So what would that shift look like? That may require a new concept or a new map iteration, but I think that's something we can maybe tweak one of the existing concepts on. So that's a prompt for the committee, for the District 8 member to consider and maybe give input in his turn, and also for research and polling to consider. And then finally, for future meetings, I feel, again, as Member Quesada said, the more the better, but also as needed. And I think we'll see that we do need them. So coming up to those alternate dates and those dependent dates as needed, I think we'll need to have those full meetings to have enough public comment and to iterate these maps properly. So I appreciate the support for just including SVI as a tool. It's not necessarily going to be what determines things. And I wanted to also address the fact that Member Hernandez, I don't see the vertical orientation as being necessary. That's something that was solely focused or primarily focused on what would it look like to lower that range number. How can we, again, break off certain precincts that are not included in community of interest boundaries? I don't think, especially considering concept A is the most popular, it won't be a vertical orientation and it won't disrupt things. So we may not get perfect on lowering the SVI if we try some of that, but it doesn't need to look like the concept map that was proposed yet. Having that tool is important though. Thank you.
Council District 8, Committee Member Buckholz and Committee Member Powers.
Yes, this is Member Buckholz. I'll try to keep my remarks brief. Certainly, I have no interest in stifling either discussion or information or the amount of time that we need to have discussion or information. So to the extent that other members feel that it's necessary to consider other information, to have meetings in order to do that, I certainly would not be in disagreement to that. My sense of where I am is still where I've expressed it before. I see most of my job here as a technical job. I'm going to have to see compelling evidence that we need to make any more changes than necessary to perform that technical job. And I felt that the comments that I heard from members Seguro, Aragon, Quesada, and Reynolds were largely in line with where my thinking is right now. So thank you.
And I would echo those comments as well. I don't want to add anything, take any additional time, but I agree with pretty much everything that's been said so far. I think we just need to continue to refine this and take as much time as we need to do the job right.
Council District 9, Committee Member Pasco and Committee Member Stull.
Hey, thanks, Petra and Madam Chair. I agree with Vice Chair Kellerman that we need to define the communities of interest. We should have a list of them by name and look at what the borders of those districts are. I know there's can be discussion back and forth about what counts in what's a community of interest, but to keep us all on the same page. So that we can protect them if we choose to protect those communities, and I think we should. I think Ms. Romberg's map is excellent, and we should include that in our list of concept maps. And I foresee that we will need to use all of the as-needed meetings. And I think that's all I had. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you all. I want to see if we could parse these things out. I think maybe the easiest thing for us to do would be to make a decision about upcoming meetings. And Petra, if you could tell us what meetings we have remaining, what were listed as optional. We want to make a decision about whether or not we want to make those meetings a part of the process.
Madam Chair, yes, we have 4 meetings scheduled. We have May 4th, which is next week, May 18th. Hang on a second, kiddo.
You know what, before we do this, I think, we just need to meet your son. So go ahead and bring him on.
Sorry. This is my son, Kiyoshi, and he wants more chocolate.
Hi, Kiyoshi, I do too. And I need to use the restroom. So give us 1 second. We're going to be done in just a minute. You can have your mommy back. Go ahead.
I have some M&Ms here, but I can't get through the screen.
Oh, I think he got those.
Kiyoshi, give us 1 second, sweetie. We're going to be done in like 5 minutes.
Yes, we're nearly done.
Okay.
Go
ahead.
So we have 4 meetings, May 4th, May 18th, June 8th, and June 29th. May 18th and June 29th are both listed as needed on the website.
Okay, Kiyoshi, I feel the same. I feel like crying too. We want to just maybe entertain a motion that we want to make all those meetings a part of the process. So I would.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
All right. I don't think we need any further discussion on that. And Petra, do we have to call the roll or can we just take a voice vote?
Let's take a roll on this one as it's a little bit more detailed than just the minutes.
Okay.
So Council District 1, Committee Member Segura.
I support the additional meetings.
Council District 2, Committee Member Romero.
I vote for the additional meetings.
Council District 3, Committee Member Quesada.
Yes, additional meetings. Thank you.
Council District 4, Committee Member Reynolds.
I approve.
Council District 5, Committee Member Aragon.
Yes.
Council District 6, Committee Chair McGill.
Yes.
Council District 7, Committee Vice Chair Kellerman.
Yes, support.
Council District 8, Committee Member Buckholz.
He's eating M&Ms.
Yes. Committee Member Buckholz, are you a yes or a no on using the as-needed meetings?
I would be a yes, as long as there are others who think that we need them.
And Committee Member, Council District 9, Committee Member Pasco.
Yes.
That is a 9-0 votes for all the meetings to be used. So I'll update the website to remove references to as needed.
Great. Thank you so much. So then I want to talk about the concept maps, community member Romberg's map, and then just in general, all concept maps, how we're gonna name them. Are we just gonna follow the letter convention that we have right now? How will we bring those maps onto the website? What criteria, making sure that they're appropriately vetted first by research and polling, like just to entertain a motion about how we're going to accept new concept maps to the process. Anybody formulate something related to that?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
would it be possible to list them as like in order, favored to least favored by members?
I would say that, that would sort of bias the process, and they are just concept maps. We're not voting on them, but we just need to name them and perhaps have them vetted by research and polling, making sure that they do meet the minimum criteria. We had a request from member Stoll that they follow all the same metrics, that they would all be sort of, taken through a series of metrics, and that would all be listed with those maps. So I would say that no, we would not list them, until we're ready to go to voting.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
may I proceed?
please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think a motion would be appropriate to move that any additional maps from citizens be labeled as Citizen 1, Citizen 2, etc. The motion should also include that each additional map that would be considered and placed on our website should be properly vetted by research and polling and staff before they're actually publicized on our website.
Yes, and do we want to add to that, member Romero, that
Aragon.
I'm sorry, member
That's
Aragon,
okay.
that I told you guys I'm tired. That we also want to give the members who submit the maps that they need to identify themselves, and they would have
Absolutely.
an opportunity to present them to the committee at a subsequent meeting.
Absolutely.
Can you make that motion?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
We have a second. Do we need further discussion? Now we go to a vote. If you want to call the roll, Petra.
Council District 1, Committee Member Segura.
I'm in favor of the motion.
Council District 2, Committee Member Romero.
In favor, as articulated by member Aragon.
Council District 3, Committee Member Quesada.
Yes.
Council District 4, Committee Member Reynolds.
Yes.
Council District 5, Committee Member Aragon.
Yes.
Council District 6, Chair McGill.
Yes.
Council District 7, Vice Chair Kellerman.
Yes.
Council District 8, Committee Member Buckholz.
Yes.
Council District 9, Committee Member Pasco.
Yes.
And that passes on an 8-1 vote.
Thank you. And then I think maybe the next to last thing is whether or not we want to include the SVI overlay to consider each one of the maps as one of the metrics that we're considering. I'd entertain a motion to the committee about whether or not we want to do that and instruct research and polling to make that analysis on all of the maps. Would anyone like to make such a motion?
Madam Chair, so
Second.
Discussion? And then we can go to a vote. And Brittany, did you need to say something before we?
Wanted to clarify that I'm understanding what we're talking about, just that we do that sort of average for each district and then calculate the range for each new map. Okay,
Yes.
Thank you very much for the clarification.
Yes. So previous question, we have a motion and a second. so we can call the roll at this point on whether or not we want to do a similar analysis as we had tonight for the range for the SVI.
Council District 1, Committee Member Seguda.
Thank you for putting me on the spot. I vote no.
Council District 2, Committee Member Romero.
Yes.
Council District 3, Committee Member Quesada.
Information I find would be useful, although it's not a deal breaker for me personally, but I vote yes.
Council District 4, Committee Member Reynolds.
Not a deal breaker, but yes.
Council District 5, Committee Member Aragon.
No.
Council District 6, Chair McGill.
Yes.
Council District 7, Vice Chair Kelman.
Yes.
Council District 8, Committee Member Buckles.
My apologies. Can you restate the motion?
To have the SBI be included as a tool for all the maps.
I believe I'm with Mr. Reynolds in the sense that I have no position on the value or the use at this point, but I am not in objection to including the material, so my vote would be yes.
Council
Include
District
the poverty index as a consideration for maps.
Council District 9, Committee Member Pasco.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes.
Lovely, that passes on a 7-2 vote.
Thank you. I want to thank you guys for your indulgence there. And Member Kellerman, Vice Chair Kellerman, I would like you to restate your request, because I believe that we were asking research and polling to create a new map based on what you talked about. And then I also want to ask research and polling about defining communities of interest. We had another member who asked for a definition for the next meeting. So Member Kellerman, can you state whether or not that was a request to research and polling, or what you are asking for there?
Madam Chair, thank you. Yeah, the only specific request to research and polling was on District 8, and what would it look like to shift to, so one of the principles of redistricting, to shift that white majority into neighboring districts. If there's another concept map or something else we can consider there. And then the communities of interest that was open to the districts representing them.
So those are two requests?
Yeah, just the first is the specific request.
Okay. Can I hear from research and polling about whether or not that's something that we can do?
Go ahead,
Madam Chair, Vice Chair Kellerman, we can take a shot at sort of unpacking District 8. We might need a little more guidance in terms of what that looks like, but we could sort of bring a concept to the next meeting if that's acceptable.
I'm not certain that I understand it either. Vice Chair Kellerman, can you just,
yeah,
we need a little bit more information.
Madam Chair and Brittany, yeah, thanks. I was really just, it's an open question about, that was the only district that had a majority white population. And considering that, and considering some of the, so one of the principles of redistricting and what you described in the initial presentation there, what would it look like to reduce that number below the majority, so below 50%? So to achieve that, what would it look like to shift precincts from District 8 into neighboring districts?
Okay.
Is that clear? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to also note, though, that District 4 is also a majority white district.
Thank you for noting that. If both of those districts could be brought below 50%, what would a concept map that considered that look like?
We will try that. It's, you know, sort of the way people are clustered. That might be tough to bring them both under 50%, but we will take a shot for sure.
And if not new maps, just thoughts on what that might look like or consider. Yeah. Thank you.
And then a definition of communities of interest. And we wanted a list of communities of interest, I believe is what the request was from a member.
No.
Nope. Okay.
And Madam Chair, to clarify, so research and polling after, this is how I'm seeing, or as I understand it, that was an open prompt to the districts that are that contain and the district representatives, the committee members here that contain those communities of interest to define those boundaries. If research and polling can help with that, that may be something to discuss on the next meeting. But how do we define those and have clear boundaries and then bake those into maps? So
exactly,
we need a list of those communities. So however we do that, however research and polling can support that effort.
And Madam Chair and Vice Chair Kellerman, I'd also like to note, just remind us that on Districtor, there's beyond just drawing a whole map, there's options to draw communities of interest. And so if that's something that the committee members or the public could be encouraged to do, that would be really helpful. We at Research and Polling don't feel super comfortable defining communities of interest because we aren't the community of most of these communities of interest.
I think that what we're saying is that, you know, you were taking those into account when you were making the concept maps. Is that correct?
Sure. Yeah. Based on what we've heard at other public meetings. Yes.
Right. So, you know, I guess what we want to say is like, you know, we feel like we've already defined them clearly. And is it something that we need to articulate better so that people understand how you're maintaining communities of interest? Is what I'm asking.
And Madam Chair, the intent here is to have clear boundaries. So we know that they were considered in the concept maps from those communities and from the districts that represent them.
Right.
What are those exact boundaries? So then we can tell which precincts are shiftable, if you will, that would allow us to move population without affecting that community of interest within that district. So a district boundary does not represent a community of interest. What is the boundary within that district? And then we can see which precincts wouldn't be affected. I don't think that's, and it sounds too that that's not possible through research and polling, not within their scope, not really, you know, ethical either. So what can we do? And this is just an open prompt, not a request for them to do work. Yeah. So using Redistrictor, I think we have the tools now for members of the public and individuals within these districts to start defining those boundaries. So that's a request to the public to do that. And
so
also,
it's an request at large for us to bring more community members to say, this is what we believe our community of interest is. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I think then that we've covered all of the requests. If we haven't covered all the requests, please so state. And if everyone thinks that we have gone over everything that we needed to, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Madam Chair, I just wanted everyone to note that our next meeting is next week. We normally have 2 weeks between meetings, but when we scheduled these, this is actually, they're back to back. So you'll get a new agenda and meeting information in the next couple days. So just so that you're not too surprised by that.
Great. Thank you all for your participation. We had many more community members present tonight. We hope that we double that for the next time. I appreciate you all. Community members, please share on your social media platforms and in your spheres of influence so that we get as many people as possible coming to these meetings. And with that, Kiyoshi, you can get your chocolate and we can all go home. Thank you so much. You guys take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Bye-bye.